Hey everyone, it's John from Art New Wave, and today I'm going to show you how to make a wrap bracelet. For those of you who took the pocket watch class, here's one of the finished pocket watches connected to the wrap ball and chain. And as you can see, the closure right here is just a simple click apart. Now, some of the others of you might have taken the wrapped bracelet or the window bezel class, and this one featured the same wrap technique taken to the next level with some beads added onto here. So very simple, and I'm going to show you both of these techniques. For making the naked version of this, there's only a few supplies that you need. You need your ball and chain, and remember you're doing two pieces of chain wrapped together using your embroidery floss. Now this is just DMC floss. There's different brands out there. I will tell you from experience, it's easier to buy some of these plastic cards and to take it off of the hank and actually roll it onto here. It just makes it easier because you'll end up with a big knotty mess if you don't. You also want to get a couple of binder clips. These are the small size, and you want two, one for each end for holding the embroidery floss when you have it on the ball and chain. Of course, you need one of the little clasps, and this is an embroidery needle. Notice it has the big hole in it. You can also use, if you come from the paper world, bookbinding needles. They have the big enough holes too. So to get started, I have my ball and chain here, and I'm going to offset this a few notches. If you want to be safe, you can see I have an extra 5 balls here, and then I have where the other end starts. And you're going to want to have this offset because remember, you need to put your little clasp on there. So if you do it right up flush with each other, you won't be able to do that. So before we get started, I'm just going to measure real quick around my wrist. And this is my meeting point right here. You do want to have this a little bit bigger if you're going to be putting the beads on here, because the beads will pull your bracelet a little bit closer. If you're making a necklace, it doesn't tend to happen that way. So there's my meeting point. I'm just going to back off a few to give me my extra notches plus some working room. And then I'm just going to cut that real quick. And then I'm going to measure another piece. It's going to be a little bit smaller. Again, offset so that they aren't exactly lined up, so you have that extra so you can actually close your bracelet. And then down here I'm going to clip it on the other end. Okay, now we're ready to begin, and you can see that I have my ball and chain offset. I have 3 extra balls here on this end, and that's where the clasp is going to go. And I have these slightly set off, centered, so that I can start my diagonal a little bit easier. So now I've tied a knot in the end of my embroidery floss. I know it's a little bit hard to see. I think you can see it there. That's just going to keep the embroidery floss together and keep it from unraveling, hopefully. And now I'm going to take my tail and I'm just going to wrap right in between 2 of the balls, and I'm going to wrap around this couple of times, 3 times to be safe. You see that wrapped right in there. Then I'm going to take my binder clip and I'm going to clip it right on top of the embroidery floss. This is going to hold the floss in place, and it's also going to hold the chain in place. I have my floss right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to diagonally cross over. I'm starting on the chain that's closest here. This is the furthest away, and I'm just crossing this over. And the most important part of this is your tension. So I'm going to start working my way down in a diagonal. So see how I'm just going around, and I'm holding the tension with my right hand here. And my left hand that's on the clip is turning the chain. So basically, my left hand is going to be doing all the work. So I'm going to take this down a little ways. just so you can see. And again, I have that nice tight tension going on. And I'm going to let go now so you can see how that is wrapping the chain together. Now, it's really important to make sure that you keep your tension tight the first inch or so on this. And I strongly suggest practicing, I don't know, at least half a dozen times just to make sure you get the tension right and get comfortable with this. The hardest part of this whole project is just the first inch. Once you have that done, you're going to just cruise along. So now I'm just going to keep turning while I'm twisting the chain around. And it gets nice once you can let go of the clamp as well. It kind of frees up your hands a little bit so you can get this really tight. So now, again, I just keep twisting down. I'm going diagonal between the chains. Now, one thing you'll notice while you're doing this also, let go of this, you can see how the chain is starting to kind of twist by itself and kind of make a snake going around. That's perfectly normal, and you want it to do that. That means you know you're doing it right. You might fight, especially if you're doing a necklace with your tail ends of the chain. That's perfectly fine. Don't even worry about it, because you might have to just straighten it out, but that's exactly the nature of wrapping the two chains together. So I'm just going to keep doing this, and I'll meet you at the end. Well, hello again, and there we are. I'm down at the other end of my chain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just wrap this until I'm right here. This is my last ball on this one. And then notice I have my extras over here for my clasp. So what I'm going to do is just wrap once and then twice around the two chains. And this one is on the very last one, and then the one next to it. Now, I'm going to take my third hand, known as my binder clip. I'm going to clip that right on top of there. And the reason why I'm doing this is now I'm going to pull off a good amount for a tail on here. I'm going to clip that off, and now I'm going to thread my needle. So here's my end here. I'm going to remove my binder clip, and it might unravel a little bit. That's okay. My needle is now going to pass underneath where I just wrapped around on the end. So I'm going to take my needle and see, I'm just passing right underneath there. Oops, just slipped. So I'm going right underneath there. It's a little bit hard to show on the camera so you can see. And I'm going to pull this tight. And it might flip around to your other side. That's completely fine. So now I'm underneath the very first loop where I just tied off there. Now I'm just going to pass under the next thread that's wrapped around on the chain. So right underneath, just like that. I do have to spin this a little bit, I'm sorry. Just so I can get a good grip. Make sure that I'm pulling it taut. There we go. I'll just put it right there in the center. So now I'm coming out right there in the middle, in between the two balls. Now you'll notice with the chain that it does have kind of a flat part that's going to start kind of spiraling around its way down, and that's totally fine. So now all I'm going to do is just continue going underneath each of those threads that are wrapping around the chain. Once you have about an inch up in the chain, then you're just going to clip it off with the scissors, and you're going to repeat that for the other end. Now, before I get started showing you all the beading technique, I wanted to give you kind of a close-up here of size of beads I use. These are number 8 seed beads, the cream color, and then these are number 4 crystals. You can switch up the different size of beads you use. This is probably my most favorite one that I like to use. You can also do delicas and 5s and 6s for crystals if you want to. I would just kind of stay away from bugle beads because they tend to be a little bit more delicate, and you're trying to stretch it over something that's a little bit kind of more organic in shape, if that makes sense. So that kind of gives you an idea of some beads you can use. Here's one tied off end of my chain, and it's a little bit hard to see. Let me flip it over. There you go. You can see it a little bit better on this side. You can see that the tail is just running right up in between the chain, and if I keep twisting, you can see the end point is right here. So that gives you an idea of what the end of chain should look like. Now I have to admit, I prepped this up a little bit so you didn't have to watch me tie off the end. What I did was I tied a knot, a triple knot, right around one of my crosshairs, and I'm like 1, 2, 3, like 4 away from the end, and I took that little tail that was left and just kind of snaked it up into here. So now what I'll do is, this is my needle right here, and I'm just going to take this down to the end. Again, I'm just snaking underneath the threads. And for those of you who are in the class and remember, I always use fire line. That's my preference. So there's that. So now I'm just going to pull this out of down to the end. I gave myself an ample amount of thread to use, so whatever you're comfortable working with. If you guys remember in class, I was joking about the Michael Phelps and the wingspan of 8 yards of thread. You want to try to avoid that. Notice that I'm here at the end. Here's my thread, here's my needle. And you need to make sure that you're starting out underneath the first thread. So I'm going to pull my needle through here, just so I'm going underneath the first thread. Pull that through. Then, try to get this in focus for you. So now, it's a little bit hard to see, but I'm coming out right here. Now what I'm going to do, you want to make sure your beads are different sizes. So I'm picking up one triangle, one of my round hematites, and then another triangle. There you go, in focus for you. Now what you're going to do, I'm coming out here underneath the first thread. I'm going to skip the next thread and go under the following thread. So you're always skipping a thread. So I'm skipping over, and I'm just going to go underneath that cross thread. And I'm going to pull this through. So there are my beads. Again, I'm going to hold this to the side here so you can see. I came out right here, I skipped over this thread, and then I went underneath this thread. Now this is where you're going to kind of follow the flat face of the bracelet, and you're going to actually kind of be beading in a spiral down. So now again, you're going to pick up one of your smalls, your larger bead, and then another one of your smalls. So in my case, I have my triangle, my hematite round, and then another triangle. And now I'm going to skip over and go in and under. And I'm going to continue this all the way down my bracelet. So here I am at the end of my ball and chain. And notice I've got my little ball tails hanging off here. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to just spin this around to the opposite side, and then I'm going to just tuck underneath the first thread. You always want to make sure you're tucking underneath that first thread, and I'm going to pull this in. And when you pull this in, you want to make sure your thread goes in between the two balls right there in the middle. Perfect. So now I'm coming up right in between there. Oops. And now what I'll be doing is I'll be filling in the blank spots going up the chain. So if you notice how it spirals around, it's going around this way. So with that spiraled around, I'm going to be filling in here, and then I'll fill in here, and then here. So it's going to spiral up the opposite way up the chain. So to begin, again, I tucked underneath that first thread. I'm picking up a small, a large, and a small onto my needle. And now I'm going to skip a thread and go under the next thread. pull that in. And once I have that pulled in, I'll show you how it starts to fill in. So I'll turn this so you can see. This was the end here, and then this is my first one here. So see how they're opposite to each other. So now, again, I'm going to get my needle and then pick up a small, a large. Oops, if I can get the large here. There's the large and the small. Have those on my needle. And now I'm going to follow the flat part of my chain just like I did on the way down. And you can always check to make sure you're opposite of where you're at. So I'm going to skip a thread and then go under a thread. So you might have to twist this a little bit to follow the pattern when you're going back up the chain. That's perfectly normal, so don't worry. So I'm under that thread. Now I'm going to pull that through. Perfect. So there's my first two opposite. Spin this around. There's my next two opposite. Now I'm just going to continue doing this all the way up the chain. And at the end, I'll tuck under the end and tie a knot. And I will be all set. Thank you for watching this video tutorial on how to make your own wrapped ball chain. And for more ideas and resources, be sure to check out the other videos here on the Art with New Wave website.